so we start, and my first question is, what's your name?
My name is Alexander Fried, but when I was born, I got three names in the eastern part of Czechoslovakia in 1935, in May the 7th, and I got three names: Netanel, Meir, Abraham, Ben Baruch. As you know, Netanel means present from God, and Meir means the enlightened, Abraham means the great father of the Jewish people. And after 8 days, when I was circumcised, and when my father gave me a little bit wine, I can imagine, of course I don't remember it, because I have the experience from my two sons, then I did not know at that time that I will be Jewish or that I belong to the Jewish community, and even more so to a very devoted Jewish community, to a religious Jewish community.
Okay, I just want to ask you, where have you been born?
I was born in Kralovo nad Tisou, or it is said in Hungarian Királyháza, or Slovak, Czech Kralovo nad Tisou, and today it is Korolevo. But my mother comes from Slovakia, and my father, I don't know how they came there from Kežmarok, but I was born there, and after 2 years we moved to Žilina. So I am a Žilina child, so to say.
Yes. So your father was a Slovak Jew?
No, my father, I think, was his father is buried. No, the mother of my father is born in Kežmarok, but my father, I think, was a Jew from Podkarpatská Rus. So I think.
So this place you mentioned,
Kralovo nad Tisou, Királyháza.
It's Podkarpatská Rus.
It is, yes, and it belonged to Czechoslovakia from 1918 to 1938.
Yes, I know. So you are what you were born in a region where there were many Jews, yes,
yeah.
And I know the Dunajská Streda, where I am from, they were called Finns. Finns. I told you once, because they spoke Yiddish.
That's right.
Okay, so what's the language you were born into?
I was born into, of course, Yiddish, as you say. My father and my mother spoke Yiddish, but I was born mainly into a Hungarian kind of environment, because we didn't speak Ukrainian. A little bit, of course, already, but the whole Weltanschauung, or the Zeitgeist, the spirit of the period in the years 1925, was the eastern part of Czechoslovakia more Hungarian than Slovak. Because Slovakia was only from Košice, it was a different area. It was close to Romania, it was close to Bukovina, I mean to Poland. But I got the education which we would say German, Hungarian, Slovak.
And your father, what did he do for a living?
My grandfather, his name was Meir Fried, and he had a hotel in Királyháza, in Kralovo nad Tisou, about 200 meters from the railway station, because I visited Királyháza in 1945, I think in June, where I have already seen the Russian flag and the Soviet Union flag. I saw many Jews, and I saw the house where I was born, a very nice building. It was a very nice hotel, and I spoke even to the nurse who knew me very well from my childhood, and I saw many Jews, very friendly, and also the Podkarpatská Rus non-Jews, whose specialty was to drink slivovica and borovička, and so they were very friendly, and I came there for a week. I saw the Jews already sitting on their luggages, preparing themselves for either to Slovakia, to Israel, or although the state of Israel did not exist, and to Palestine in that 1945, or they were preparing themselves to Canada or to America. It was very romantic to me, this kind, after I was liberated in 1945 from the trip of death in the May 1945. I got a very nice present because on the 7th of May I reached my 20th birthday. So I came because I wanted to see it. I got a birth certificate from the city of Kralovo na Tiso. And about this I could write a book. It was a fascinating thing. These Jewish people, the Carpathian Jews, they had a special mentality. I don't know whether it is the same mentality. As you know, this word about Finn is absolutely crazy. It is more a joke because all the Jews, the Viennese Jews who were expulsed in 1630 came, let's say, to Prague or to Poland. So the previous Western Jews or the present Western Jews were once Eastern Jews, and the Eastern Jews were once Western Jews, and there is no a better quality of human beings because you are Western. There were,
you know, you don't have to be apologetic about this. I'm just trying to.
No, I understand.
Okay, okay. But still, I would like to stick a little bit to your family. So your father was a hotel owner, but at 1927 he left to Žilina, and what he did?
1927 he came to Žilina because, as we know in history, everything we ask why, and we say what, and we say for what were the consequences. So Žilina was a very famous crossroad. Žilina had a railway station from to Prague. Žilina has a crossroad to Košice, a crossroad to Bratislava, to Těšín, Bohumín. So my father made a very start undertaking. He knew in the prosperous, relatively prosperous, although Czechoslovakia had a crisis like the whole world in the 30s, but in the 20s he thought that there are many Jewish people who were agents of different firms. Like they traveled very much to Rolny, to Prostějov. There was a big, or Žilina had a sukenka, and it was really successful, although my father was not a very good administrator. My mother was very much tortured in the kitchen. We had sometimes 50, 60 guests and abonnents. It means people who ate every day, religious. Our restaurant was kasher limhadrin min hamehadrin, what means that the most kosher. And we not only had guests and a very rich menu with all specialties, but we had also beer, and we had also liver and tepertö, what means grammel, and non-Jews came to buy all these specialties. And Žilina was a city at that time about 20,000 inhabitants, and there were 3,200 Jews. And the Neolog community, the more weak conservatives, I would say, they were about 2,500, and the rest were the Orthodox.
Neolog means conservative.
Neolog means more conservative liberal, I would say. And it was really an enjoyment to live in Žilina because it was, we had a marvelous synagogue. The rabbi the name was Martin Klein. I still have a Gemara from him, and he was a great personality. He's also the Jewish Encyclopedia mentioned, and Žilina had many gerim. One of the Gabaim was Dr. Braun, and his name was Avraham ben Avraham, and my father was Talmid Torah Gabai, so he was very devoted to cheder and to education. But what was his most important particularity, that he sat on the knees of the great Chazan Yossele Rosenblatt. Yossele Rosenblatt, every Jew, Central Europe and America knows that he, like Kvartin and Kusavitsky and all these great names, he was one of the greatest. And my father was a great specialist of Chazanut, and because we didn't have enough money, and although we had a lot of guests, he went to Predmier, about 20 kilometers from Žilina, where was a fabric of paper fabric, and they were very rich Jews, and he went to pray for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur because he could pray, and he earned a little bit money there. So I was really educated in a strict and beautiful environment. Especially the Shabbat for us was something like, you know, an apotheosis of life, and like if you have a melody and then the ritardando, you know, that you are expecting the explosion. Like in Vltava or Smetana, let's say. What does it mean? It means that we enjoyed ourselves for our Shabbat. The mother cleansed the house, and we came home, we were standing around the table, and father was strict, and we sang Shalom Aleichem, Malachi HaShalom, and we have excellent food. So therefore I always enjoyed these holidays, because it was a little bit difficult to pray in the synagogue. We had to get up, down, because we had to stand a long time. We had to bow ourselves, and the prayer were very long. But the whole environment, where there were so many, a few very rich Jews, the family Price, for instance, the family Schlesinger, he was a great humanist, he was a great giver, and Samuel Schlesinger, he was the Rosh HaKahal. So I simply, as a child, already in the year 1930, I went to the Cheder, and in the Cheder there were not only Orthodox Jews, but also a few from the Neolog community, and it was, how should I say, it was a romantic, poetic life, I would almost say. It is like a poesy, you know, like a poetic.
What's your first memory from this?
My first memory is a bird, and it was a uhu. This bird, which is the symbol of wisdom, I came into a Hotel Remi in the black room, and I saw the big eyes. But I think that another kind of remembrance in my life is like a carnival that I've seen in Kirai Haza, still maybe when I was 2 years old or something like that. People in different colors, and the noises like a cacophony, and like, you know, very colorful people who were dancing. So I had a very nice...
What age was it?
It was 2.5 years.
Really? You have memories?
Yeah, I think, yes, and I still remember today every detail what I lived through. Of course I didn't remember the circumcision, and I didn't remember, but I think, I don't remember the train that we took from Kirai Haza to Žilina. This I don't remember, but I remember in Žilina the bus to Rajecke Teplice, this was a spa, and I remember that there was, I could speak about all kind of typical people in Žilina. For instance, there was a man, Heller was his name, and he didn't hear, and he didn't speak, and he was the goalkeeper of Eshka Rapid Žilina, and he was a Jew. And there were many Jews who were carrying luggages at the railway station. There were many Jews who were taxi men, and I still remember all of them.
I just want to check.
You can close it a little bit, and I will tell you only what I wanted to tell you. You don't want to close it?
No. No.
Because I wanted to, you know, I have a very rich...
I see, but I would like to be a little bit consistent.
Specific.
Consistent. Yeah. We spoke only 10 minutes till now, and you said a lot already, because you have a lot to say. So, I would like to ask you, what's your first memory about something that's connected to Judaism?
My first memory, of course, is the Cheder. Is that my parents, my mother took me which was not very far away, because we lived very near to the railway station in Žilina. There was a big hotel, Remi, and I came to the Cheder, and the Cheder, even in the film, which was now in the Czech television, in the 1st of February 2009, there was, and there you can see the table where I was sitting, and then of course my mother and my father and the Jews of Žilina and the city of Žilina. As I'm very curious, and I can imagine that this curiosity, I remember I had a nurse when I was a small child. Her name was Ria. She came from Berlin, and she was a Christian, and she carried me on her hands, and once she took me into the church, in the Catholic or in the Protestant church at Easter, and I saw Jesus, the kind of grave, how he was lying there, and the Orol, the Slovak organization, which is a pendant to the Sokol of Czech, very nationalistic, Orol. When I came home, my mother asked me, Shanile, from where are you coming? And I said, from Himmel. So I said, from the heaven, because I spoke certainly very good German. And then I know, for instance, not far where we had a restaurant was a man, Tenzer. Tenzer was a Hungarian. He was a tailor, and we always went to repair our things, dresses. And I remember there was a man whose name was Lombardi. Lombardi was of Italian origin, and he was the proprietor of the restaurant where we were. That today doesn't exist. And he was very befriended with my father, because my father didn't pay always exactly. So he always gave him wine, and this Lombardi came very often to our restaurant. And then he had mysteriously a Czech friend whose name was, now I have forgotten, and they were very befriended. Although my father didn't speak very well Czech, but this Šikl was his name, Šikl. And this Šikl was also in Podkarpatská Rus, Czech, because there were 100,000 Czechs in the Podkarpatská Rus. They founded the school, they organized and so on. And they always had something mysterious. Maybe they spoke about women, I don't know, or whatever. At that time there was circulated a song in the Czechoslovak Republic, Já bych chtěl mít tvé foto, da 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 dam, and different songs which are, you know, very typical Czech, because the Czechoslovak Republic was very much influenced by the Czechs. The Slovaks were only awakening from their kind of not paralysis, but the Czechs gave them a lot of impulses. And of course the Slovaks had a grudge, because always if you are kind of have to thank to someone, you don't like it. But my first impression, and I'm sorry that I'm speaking so much, but you know, when you ask me questions, so I have such a rich past that I'm exploding.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so
well.
No, it's
You have to say well.
I see.
It doesn't make a difference.
Well done. Well done.
Okay, well done. Thank
Okay.
you.
Anyway, what? Okay, so more or less, I understand. You actually grew up in Žilina. Age of 5, you went to Cheder. Could you tell me something about the Cheder? Who taught you? Who was the teacher?
The teacher was Mr. Friedman. He came from Podkarpatská Rus. He was a small man with a reddish beard, with a small, slim face, who smoked all the time. The cheapest cigarettes at that time, they were Zorki. Zorki had a very strong nicotine, and I liked it. I did not know that at that time the nicotine was harmful, and I liked it. His dress and everything was full of this odor of the cigarette, and he was very strict. and we learned Bereshit, Boru, Elohim, Es HaShamayim, Ves Uretz, and not like today in Hebrew, Bereshit, Bara Elohim et HaShamayim, and we studied the Sidrot, Bo and Beshalach and Yitro and all these things, and to me it was very romantic when, for instance, the story about Joseph with Apotif, with this girl, woman who wanted to have sex with him, and I didn't understand it, of course, but I always asked questions, what the most made me, so to say, and it's why I was so enthusiastic about the Torah, because I saw their interesting stories. But I was always very afraid before Pesach, when I had to say Manishtana Halayla Mikol Halilot, because I had to know it by heart. But still today, until today, I know a lot of things by heart, because I always studied these things so thoroughly that it remained. But this was not everything. Then, because I was always a little bit awakened, I was always a little bit of a rebel. I wasn't fanatic religious. I liked sport. And I was a good football player, a good handball, a good high jumper.
Shadi, I just would like to stick a little bit to this cheder, because you know, this reminds me, I also used to go to cheder in Dunajska Streda after war.
Really?
There was a teacher, Baum, was a also small man with beard, very strict, and he had this stick, not stick, ruler,
yes.
Ruler, and with this ruler he used to hit us when we didn't say correctly something, because we had to, so I have the memories, but we used to go only at Sunday to the cheder.
We used every day.
Every day?
Every day, no. But of course, this was from when I was 4 to 5 years, 6 years, because when I was 6 years, and I have the photos here from my school. I'll show you.
Take a picture.
Yes, when I was 6 years, so I started Żydowska Szkola. Żydowska Szkola was very famous in Judea, but you wanted to say about the cheder. So the cheder was a long table in the entrance room to the synagogue. The synagogue, there were about 150 people could get in to high holidays, and down was a mikveh, and there was the shames. His name was Yakubovich. He had about 5 daughters and 1 son, and this cheder, until today, there is a museum in Žilina, and this table is still there, but I think that they already made some changes, and I can show you exactly, if you would look at this television film, which was in the Czech television number, I think number 1, Česká televízia 1, at the 1st of February 2009 at 2:14:10, then you will see the cheder. But the problem is that I did not think about the future at that time. I was so well settled in my life, and I was happy. We didn't think, we knew that when the Tri Krali came, when the Christian holidays, that they tried to beat us up, this Slovak, and I had a Prague. I had something, and I had a boxer, kind of iron. I was always a very strong fighter, and we never, they said always Žid, Smrad, Kolovrat, and we answered Kresťan, Catholic, Vysral sa na stolik, and we were very kind of strong, and this was, this didn't bother me. I didn't realize that I was born into a process which was already 2,000 years or longer, that this Jew hatred or this Jew animosity, I didn't feel it so much. I didn't take it to my heart. But I was very much entrenched in my Judaism, and I think that this prepared me for my life, also in the concentration camps, in the trip of death, which made me stronger maybe, because I'm still today looking for Jews. I like to discover them, and I'm very upset about those Jews who abandoned Judaism, who changed names, who converted to Christianity, because I think this is a weakness of character, and I give a lot of lectures in many different places, but I'm not a Judaist, so to say. I'm not a rabbi, but because I got this education, so even in my university position, when I spoke about the Renaissance to Christians in the Catholic University, Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax, where I was the chairman of the history department, Mount St. Vincent was very religious. I always spoke about Judaism, because I have a kind of, not a phobia, but a kind of weakness maybe.
Obsession.
Obsession a little bit, yes, that I'm looking for a Jew. I'm happy if I know, let's say that now the Prime Minister of the Czech Republic is Jewish, although he's not halachically Jewish, but he proclaims himself that he's Jewish and his son comes. So it warms up my heart, because I think that we are something very mysterious and something special, and this I got from my education, but this is also a character, a special characteristic, because my brother, for instance, does not have this phobia in quotation mark, and many of my friends in the Cheder, they know that they are Jewish and they got the education, but to them it is not an important issue. But to me, Judaism is a very important issue, and I live it not in a strictly religious way, but I like to listen to other people when they are praying, and I am enthusiastic when I see that people are really shocking and thinking with their whole heart that there is a God who created the world, and Adonai li lo ira min ha-meitzar karati ya'anan b'merchav, and all these things. Who is better than God? And I think that God is really, even if I don't believe if it is a game or a joke, but it is a nice word. It has some kind of connotation of goodness, of improvement, and why not? Why not? But I am not keeping all the mitzvot, and I am not a strict religious Jew, but I am still having complexes if I have to travel on Shabbat, or if I eat something which is not kosher. I still have kind of conscience problems.
Can you tell me, you spoke about the Cheder, and then you said that you went to
The
Jewish school.
Yes.
What that means, Jewish school?
Židovská škola in Žilina was in the upper town. Žilina has a downtown and the upper town, and the Jewish school was a very renommé school. It means that many Christians visited the school, about 15 to 20%. And I must tell you a very interesting story. The teacher in the first class was Vali Neini. And this Vali Neini, you see still Hungarian words even in Žilina. And she asked always every pupil what is his name or her name. And it was a Jewish school, not strictly religious. The director was Mr. Shalgo. He was very voluminous. And I said, Nesanel Chlapec. And everybody started to laugh, because this was not a usual name. The Žilina youth were either Oscar or Tomasz or so, and Nesanel was Netanel, which I got the first name. So I started to cry, came home, and I said, my father, listen, I don't know why they are laughing, and so. And he went to the school, and then he changed the name of Alexander. Nesanel is like Alexander, so I got the name Alexander. And so it was a very good school. It is, we studied, of course, like every school.
In what language you spoke?
We studied Slovak. This was everything strictly Slovak. And we studied, there was also religion. And the Christian, of course, went on. There were Homola, for instance, my Christian friend Shanyo Španik, Bakaj, and girls, Gaziova. There were many Slovak. Near to me was sitting Ivan Bielina. His father was the veliteľ 41. piešieho pluku Edvarda Beneše. And there was a boy whose name was Paolo Fabri. He was a genius. He was at that time, he drew beautifully. I was absolutely. Then was a boy who came from Hungary. His name was Tomáš Fodor. And I remember that when the director Shalgo was standing outside of the door, his tummy was. I saw it, but only the tummy, you know. But I didn't see him. He was very fat, but he was a good pedagogue, a good educator, and the school was marvelous. It was mathematics, Slovak language, religion. We learned like until 1936. This was the school.
36, which means
it started 1931 and 1936, 5 years. And this is the Základná Ľudová škola.
Yes.
No, but then in 1937, when my father was in a restaurant, about the restaurant it would be more interesting to speak than about the cheder and about the school, because there was a woman whose name was Margit Trojhaft. This Margit Trojhaft came from Mikuláš, and she was a servant in our restaurant. And she she was very pretty, and she had this kind of a dress which was sometimes opening up, and these poor Jews were looking at her all the time. And she had a harmonium. She brought it. This is like a small piano, and she played always the beautiful songs of not of Wagner, of another great romantic German, and Leise Flehe and all these songs. We had a gramophone at home, which was his master's voice with the whole big kind of like a shirm, like jako parapluj, and we had hundreds of gramophoneové platně, gramophone discs, and I knew always which disc or what. This was Hazen Rosenblatt, there was Josef Schmidt. Josef Schmidt was a Jewish cantor who was in the 1930s one of the greatest singers. He was a tenor, and he died in a concentration camp. There was Jan Kiepura, there was this great, and we had a newspaper at home which came from Hungary. I've forgotten now the name, and I was enthusiastic looking already. At that time I looked at the pretty women, because the women had corsets. The women did not have, at that time, you know, it was not like today, a corset was very important, that kept the women, and this was Multe Žievő. This was the paper, and we got it every week. And I was, so therefore I beszélek máma is egy kicsit magyarul, de nem beszélek nagyon jól, de azért, mert mi kis fiúk, és hallottam mindig beszélni magyarul, not only my father and my mother, but also those people who came to eat to the restaurant. And so I wouldn't be able today give a lecture in Hungary language, but I think that I wouldn't be lost, and I mastered the English, the Magyar language. And what was very interesting, that once came a man whose name was Mr. Haupt. I could tell you all the names of those people who were eating every day. Not of those who came. There was a man whose name was Salzmann. He was a Zahntechniker, and when he ate, he ate like a fight. And there was Karchi Kraus. He was a great skier. Then there was Fish, a man who came from Bratislava. I remember I see them, the faces in the 1930s. But there came one day a man, because we had kosher limhadrin, minamehadrin, and there was in Topolčany, which is a city not far from Nitra, in central Slovakia, there was a big Jewish community, Mr. Haupt. And what was Mr. Haupt selling? Mr. Haupt was selling cheese, twaroch, and butter, and he came sometimes for orders and for my father. And one day he said to my father, "Are you not ashamed that your son, who is now 12 years old, that he does not go to yeshiva, that he does not go to, you know, to a higher academy?" And so, to make a long story very short, my mother prepared me a very nice pyjama and luggage, and my father brought me to Topolčany, and I lived with the family Deutelbaum and Fischer Baci, and in a very cold room, and I ate eggs every day with another family. And Monday with the family of Katzburg, Tuesday Zarkover, and then Bernstein and Kornfeld. I remember them all, and I was 12 years old. But I was very awakened, and I enjoyed it very much because...
So you went to yeshiva from the age of 12?
I went of 12, yes. And this was the time when Masaryk, of course, died, exactly in this. And I was already attached, and I did not know at that time that I will get a doctorate, my doctorate thesis about his first parliamentary activity in Vienna, 1891, 1893, and that I will get a Čestná medaile Tomáše Garriga Masaryka, because I always very much lectured and I wrote many articles about Masaryk and the Jews, like about Kafka and the Jews. This is a little bit my specialties.
Okay, so in 1937 you went to Topolčany, and you were there till when?
I was there until the Slovak state not started, but it was already proclaimed. So to say, I came in July, I think, 1937, and Masaryk died in September. And I remember how everybody was said, but this was also the time when there was in Spain the fascists against the communists, and many Jews from Topolčany went to fight there. These were the leftist Jews. Breuer was the family, and I remember, I must tell you a very interesting thing. When I was a small child, I'm 12 years old, I came to live with this Fischer Baci, or what was his name, and there were 3 women, old women, sitting in the kitchen, and I came and they looked at me, Shanyo and so, and they couldn't keep themselves, you know, they had this gas was coming out from them, and they said, musíš nám odpustiť, my sa už nemôžeme zdržovať. And I didn't know how to laugh or not to laugh. But I remember one day, it was a marvelous thing, this was Hanukkah, and there were these krapfen, you know, like in Israel you eat those, and I walked in the street of Topolčany, and one woman, because it was warm, one woman made this sufganiot, Krapfen in German, and she said, Burschele, komm her, ich gebe dir einen Krapf. I still remember how marvelous taste. But then I lived with the family Deutelbaum, and they were not religious. And they had a nice apartment, and every day at 4 they prepared a jause, a kind of tea with bread and marmalade. I still see the marmalade today. And there was a boy whose name was Weiss. And he didn't go to the yeshiva, but he went to the gymnasium. He was a very smart boy, and we played football, not with, like today, with buttons. And the first or the 2 nights I cried terribly, because I loved very much my mother, and I was now on my own. And and we lived together with this Weiss. He was from a village, and his father was a great velkostatkar, so he was a very rich man. And to me, the whole Topolchany was a beautiful romantic experience. But in the yeshiva, this was not so easy. This was not a real yeshiva because it was a Machzikei Torah. Machzikei Torah means for yeshiva bocherim who were not yet bar mitzvah. This was before. This was kind of a, like colleges today in Canada and America, before the universities. And there I studied the Baba Metzia, Gittin, and I still remember psukim, parts of Ili Metziot Shiloh, Ilu Chaim Lachi, and the Rebbe was very strict. And I belonged to the best people. He divided it in different groupings, and I was in the first group. But I wasn't the best. The best was Akos Adler and another boy who knew the whole Shas by heart already at 20, at the Shisha Sidurim, means the Talmud.
What happened to him?
All went they all died. They were murdered. But what happened once, I remember when I came to Topolchany, and I can't forget, there was an Agudas Israel. And on the main square of Topolchany, which was the church, and a big dog, and a big dog who didn't do anything, and two boys were standing, and I was looking at them. And one was, his name was Shunyo Leuchter, and the other one was this Akos Adler. And they saw me, and I said, I am also a bocher now. And they made some kind of a trick with me that I wouldn't say it, but they laughed about me, like about, they gave me the hand, and put, oni si prdli, albo niečo takého. To by asi tam nemalo byť. Takže, no, but you know, and I went sometimes to pray at Shabbat to the Aguda, and I enjoyed very much. I don't know who I got a Sidur, which was with this thin paper, you know, from Israel, and I enjoyed this Sidur, and I enjoyed also the yeshiva, but there was a rabbi, our teacher, forgotten now the name. He ate after 3 o'clock, he took 2 apples, he cut them, he ate, and sometimes he made such thing and put it in his mouth. I still remember today these details. You know, I should write maybe a book about these things because I think it would be very interesting. But mainly I should write about these people who came to eat into our restaurant. This would be fascinating, I think.
Let me ask you, your family, it's not even before.
Okay.
About your family, you had brother, right?
I had a brother. My brother is a doctor of biochemistry. He lives in Kanata. This is a small city of 70,000 inhabitants near Ottawa. And he was 2 years younger than me. We always had some problems of who is better in what. You know, he was better in swimming, in skiing, I was better in that. And we had already a lot of fights together. But my father was the son of Meir Fried, and he had a brother also who lived in Pittsburgh. And after the war, this Theodor Fried, or what was his name, he sent a mail looking after his brother. But my father was murdered in Buchenwald. And my mother was the 16th daughter of a rabbi who had 2 women. The first name, I don't know, with her she had 6 or 7 children, and with the second her name was Miller. And therefore I'm related to one of the great Chazanim, Ben Zion Miller, who is still today Chazan in New York. My mother was the 16th daughter, the youngest daughter, and she lived in Kralovsky Chlmec, in Kiraj Helmec, which is in Slovakia, because there she had a sister. And I had about 300-400 of cousins, first cousins, seconds of cousins, because it was such a big family. And what I wanted to say, my mother was also, her father was Netanel Lauer was his name. And this Netanel Lauer is buried in Keshmarok. Therefore I thought that he he came from Keshmarok, but I was there in the cemetery, couldn't find his grave. But he died around 1899, and my mother was born 1899, and my mother was born 1888. And she, because we had this kosher restaurant, Limhadrin, Mina Mehadrin, so she was always preparing the food, and we had some cousins, Margit and Gizi and Vali, who didn't have any money, so they were working in our house, and they ate in our house, and we helped them. And I had a very rich youth, because I was confronted with so many different types of people. Firstly, these Jewish very religious people, these Jewish non-religious, these Jewish skeptical, and the Slovaks and Magyars and Germans, because Žilina were married Germans. We had a man who was a Friedrich, who came every day, and they were very friendly to us. He was our best friend, and Czechs. So
probably, actually I would like to ask you, when first time you felt that something has changed in your life?
I felt it in Topolčany, when in 1938, when I went to pray Friday night to Shomrei Shabbat, or the synagogue, a special name, and we came out from the synagogue. I was already 13 years old, because I came there when I was 12, and I didn't have a real bar mitzvah. It was only on Thursday, because on Thursday one is also sometimes leinen, you know, and then when we came out from the shul, I've seen with white color Židia do Palestini, and I saw Jews with big noses, and in Topolčany. And then I came home to Žilina, because the Machzikei Torah ended, and I was walking with my good friend Hansi Weiss, who changed his name to Jan Vido, which I criticized him very much about that. But he did not know about Judaism anything. He was from the Neolog community. His father was a doctor, and he was also a doctor, studied medicine. And we were walking by chance near the Finančný Palác, Žilina, and I see an assemblance of people. And this was the 4th or the 5th October 1938. And they threw from the Finančný Palác in Žilina the flag of Czechoslovakia from a higher level down to the earth, and they were singing Hej Slováci. Hej Slováci, the Slovak kind of Na Tatrou sa blízka and these things. And then I still didn't understand it, you know. I knew that something is going on, and I realized that this was the beginning of the fascist Slovak state, which was promulgated, or which came into being on the 14th of March 1939. But this was autonomia, and the people in Žilina, the primitive people, the Slovaks, they said, a viete už, že sme dostali autobus? They did not know, you know, autobus and different. And then there was a Jewish man who also mixed every word. And he said, viete, že tam bola veľká menštruácia, instead of saying demonstrácia, you know. And I remember all these things, but it started already to shiver, to tremble. It started something which because I was a very good sportsman, and I liked my youth, and I didn't take it very much to heart, all these things. But then later, Žilina was the center of Slovak nationalism. There was the daily Gardista, which printed in Žilina, and Tuka, and Šanjomach, and Tiso was born in Velká Biča, very near to Žilina. So it was a very kind of Catholic national, because Turčiansky Svatý Martin was the Matica Slovenska, which was 30 kilometers from Žilina, 40, near to Vrútky. So I realized that something changes in life, but when I really started to be afraid was when I couldn't go to school, and when I came to a Miha, a Hachshara. And this was Mitteljugend Hachshara, like it was the Machzikei Torah, so it was a Hachshara for younger people who were not yet 15 or 16. And we were in Gordonia Maccabi HaTzair. This was a socialist kind of organization in Chatza, and we had a building, and our Menahel was Mordechai, a marvelous human being. You know, when you are young, you sometimes exaggerate a little bit the greatness of people who are, but he was really a marvelous Menahel, and there were about 35 kids, young boys, about 20 and 15 girls or so, and some Jews in the city who came to give us lessons, because we made this for the Aliyah to go to Palestine. But I had a bad luck that I was born in May 1925. If I would have born in May 1924, if I had been born in 1924, I would get a certificate, an affidavit to Palestine. My friends who were 24, they came to Palestine, like Bandi Zygmunt and the other, and I had to stay in Slovakia. But then once we had Onek Shabbat every Friday night, we worked, we had chinchili, we had animals, we prepared ourselves for Palestine, and once we hear stones in the windows, and this was already the Slovak state, because the Slovak state started in 1939, and this was 1940-41, that I was 1 year in Chatza. And now we got a order that we should be prepared for Monday morning. They will take us to concentration camp. And I don't understand myself until today, because I always was very good in running away when we played this Bojník a Četník, when we played all these games. You know, I was a very moving kind, because I was a good sportsman. Ja som hral veľmi dobre hlavičky, I made 100 times, you know, with the balls and all these tricks. I don't understand until today that I didn't run away, and that I stayed in Chatza, and they took us and they brought us to concentration camp in Žilina, which was really a concentration camp, not a death camp. From there went about 57,000 Jews to Auschwitz and to other concentration camps. And there was, it was terrible. We came and we sang in Rajecká Street, which was the street where today is the concentration, where the concentration camp was. We sang a Hebrew song, Mi Yivne Yivne Bayit Be'Ranana, Mi Yivne Yivne Bayit Be'Moshava, Anachnu HaChalutzim, or we sang Ba'Menucha Le'Agea, or Roe, Hebrew songs. We were very, and the door opened and we saw Arbeit macht Freude, and when the Nazis started to beat us. And I was very lucky, because I never got one hit during the whole Nazi period. Only from one Polish man in Sachsenhausen concentration camp, who said, if you give me your Machorka, your cigarettes, which we got, then I will bring you bread the next day. But he never brought me, and then I said, why did you not bring me? And then we started to fight. But I never got from the Nazis, but there it was terrible, because we were 5 boys. And therefore you see these 4 trees there, the 4 trees. There where the internet is, the small picture, the 4 trees.
Yes.
And these are 4 boys. Kiki Alt, Šanjo Špronc, Izzy Miadovnik, and Peter Zlatner. And should I stop?
No, you can continue.
No, I want to, I see. And I have this in all of my rooms because Kiki Alt was my best friend. He came from Silesia and he was a very smart boy. He wrote already poetry and he was, when the Slovak fascists, the Carpathian fascists, not the Sudeten fascists, there was a difference between Sudeten fascists and the Carpathian fascists. Like in Poland there were other. So they came and it was a terrible, it was worse than Gehinnom. They were beating up Walter Holzmann, who had problems with kidneys. He had to go pee-pee to make, or someone who had very strong glasses couldn't see. And I was standing and looking, and Kiki was telling me, Shanyo, jako możemy oddział uciec? It wasn't possible because these were the barracks of the 41. Pieši pluk dla Edvarda Beneše, and the ceilings was very high. It was just impossible. And so I stayed there about for 7-8 days. And it was torture, just torture. It was something terrible. And one day came a guardist and said, Kdo je Shanyo Fried? Kdo je Alexander Fried? Pán veliteľ Marček chce s vami hovoriť. I said, okay. I went through the barracks, came to him, tall man. He was a gymnasium teacher or professor or whatever. And he said, at the beginning of April you will be leaving the camp. I said, but I don't want to leave. I said, I don't want to leave. I want to be with my friends. We did not know yet in 1942 that Auschwitz existed. It didn't exist yet. We thought we are going to Poland and or to Russia, that we are going to work. So I said, ale prepáčte, ale ja nechcem, ja chcem zostať s mojimi priateľmi. Pán, nie, to nejde. I came back and I told these boys from Čaca, from the Achsham, and told them, počujte, ja neviem, čo sa stalo. On hovorí, že ja mám. They looked at me, they couldn't believe it, because it was really torture. It was beating, and if you didn't have the bed, was not straight or something, so they hit you. And then, after another 3 days, came again this man, Alexander Fried, pán veliteľ s vami chce zase ešte raz hovoriť. And to make a long story short, the night of the 27th of March, I think, or it was already the 1st of April, I don't know, I had to help my 4 boys into the wagon. And I was freed. They were so rebríky také do tých vagónov dreva. And these gardists who were primitive nothings, they were drunkards and they were happy they got at night there was a ramp in Žilina and they took 1,000 people and I had to help Kiki Alt, Čani Špronc, Izzy Miadovnik, Peter Zlatner into the wagon. I came back and I was at once in a dark room and I heard the whistling of the locomotive, and this I can't forget all my life. Because I did not know what will happen, but when they came on to Treblinka, they were immediately killed. And I remember like today, a small piece of paper with a blue printed ribbon, written Alexander Fried. I came to the gate of the concentration camp, I showed this. They let me out. I came home, this was Friday afternoon, we had a Shabbos dinner. My brother was there still, he's 2 years younger than me. And we had, my mother, we always had farfelech for Shabbos, and we had tomato juice with farfelech and chicken and beautiful dinner Shabbat. And my friends maybe were already murdered. And until today, I don't know why. But I can surmise, I can imagine. My father, we lived in the Dlabachova Street. And the Dlabachova Street in Žilina is very close to Štefanikova Street. And in the Štefanikova Street, the Marček lived. And I think that my mother went to the wife of this, because my father, firstly they took only younger people, and my father was not yet in danger. So I imagine he went to the woman and he told her that firstly he asked her for Rahmanut and for, the son is in concentration camp, and he said he wasn't born in Slovakia, he was born what is today Hungary. This was Hungary, but this area, Kirajaza. And he does not...
father?
Yes, my father, no, I was born there.
You were?
Yes, and I think he said that I do not belong to the legislation of the Slovak Republic. And maybe his wife influenced the husband, I don't know. There is a big book, Židia v Žiline, there is a lot about me. You can read, but they don't know about Judaism. His name is Frankel. He is now the president of the whole Slovak Jews, his brother. And I told him the story, but I must tell you something which is very interesting in this connection. And as you notice that I'm trustworthy, you know what is trustworthy?
Yeah, of course.
That I'm speaking really from my neshama, from my heart, and I'm not exaggerating and I'm not adding anything. When I was a small boy, about 7 years old, 5 or 6 years old, we were playing in the courtyard with my brother, with other people. We made with a knife, different borders like Russia, Germany, and France, and we hacked the knife and we said, who takes this part of we played. And at once I got a reflex, an impulse. I looked up and I saw 2 angels. Very high in the heavens, 2 beautiful angels like a neon light. At that time there were no planes and there was nothing like that. It was a beautiful blue sky and 2 angels. I never spoke about that. It was, I saw something. And after I was freed, and 10 or 12 times, 100% death, I was freed from a wagon which went to Sachsenhausen. I put down my feet and the SS started, they wanted to kill us, and all the 10 were murdered, and many times like that. So then I started to think, maybe there is something high. Maybe there is something in heaven. Maybe that these angels were my saving.
Protectors.
Yes. And I can assure you, once in Marienbad, I've seen a spirit at night. I don't know who it was, whether it was Kiki Alt, whether it was my Austrian friend Masicek, came absolutely close to my bed. The window was cracking, the cupboard were cracking. I was frightened. And so something there must be, because this is 100% that there was a spirit, which I felt, came directly to my face. And this is 100% that I saw these 2 small angels. I did not know whether they were angels, but there was something flying like a neon with, and I didn't say to my brother anything to know. I just noticed it. And this maybe explains that I was under protection, But I don't consider myself to be any saint, because I'm making many sins. I'm not sacred. I'm honest, of course, and in my character I'm very devoted to truth. But sometimes I was looking at other women when I was married, and I was kind of not very orderly in my preparations of lectures, although I was always well prepared, but I had a lot of problems. And so I don't consider myself to be something special. But why I had this angel experience, I don't know until today. And I was not only saved in concentration camp, but I was also saved when I was in Quebec, in a hotel where the fire started and people were at my door. The saviors from the fire, they broke into my room and they carried me out because I had earplugs in my ears because it was noisy outside. And I was saved by an operation, cancer, and I had prostata problems and so, and many times. But in concentration camp, from the trip of death, where I helped many of my colleagues, I was 100% saved. And I was saved near a city which was called Krivitz, very near, 12 kilometers near Schwerin. Schwerin is a beautiful German city, and it is the capital of a state where the islands are, the German islands, you know, the Northern Sea. And about this I could tell you again, and now I'm really tired, so I would like to stop now.
Okay.
So,
thank you very
אני
much.
חושב
And you survived. And you didn't know why you were asked, and so you assumed that somebody intervened and all this you said. Okay, so my question is, what next? What happened next after?
Yes, so firstly I would like to thank you again, Eugen, that you are giving me the possibility to speak, and also I wanted to say that it is marvelous to become old, and now I'm 85, but one never has to forget that one is capable to start something new. So it is good to be old, but I'm pleased that I can now speak about that my memory works and that I'm relatively healthy. So what happened then? It happened such a thing that it was April 1942, and I came home, and I think I spoke already about that I was Shabbat, and so, and then I had a friend, his name was Jano Weil. He was an engineer, and we were very good friends from the Tnua Gordonia Maccabi Hatzair, and his uncle, Engineer Weil, was in Bratislava, and he had protection to the office. I think his name was Dr. Vasek. He was the head of the Jewish department in the Slovak state, and he interviewed on my behalf with the Slovak government or whatever, because it was still not the hiatus. The hiatus, the break of the transports was around September 1942. So I was now April 1942, and we had to be always afraid that we could be caught again and that we could be deported, because the transports went on in Žilina concentration camp until September 1942. And what happened now, he succeeded to arrange for me a white document. I don't know why they called it white document. It was a Vinimka. Výnimka means something extraordinary, which they handed out to people who were economically important for the Slovak state. And I, of course, was very grateful because I had a little bit a grudge against Jano, although we were very good friends, and because he was very popular in the Gordonia Maccabi Hatzair, and he was from Žilina, native, and I was from Podkarpatska Rus, native, and although I was the most knowledgeable in Judaism in the Kvutzat Herzl, we had different Kvutzot in Gordonia Maccabi Hatzair, but we always had a fight who is more popular and who is more important, but I was very grateful to him that he arranged to me this Biela Legitimacja, what gave me a protection for 2 good years, and that I worked, I had to work under Stavebne Društvo. Stavebne Društvo was a firm of the Slovak state, I think, and they were building different houses, for instance in Bratislava, in Vrútky, in Bánovce nad Bebravou, and all these places I was working.
Okay, sorry.
In all of these places I was working, and I was really very lucky because my mother was, in the meantime, she got, she had some problems, and she was operated in Nitra, because in Nitra there was Židovská nemocnica, there was a Jewish hospital. But in Nitra was also a man, I've forgotten his name, who tortured Jews in the streets. He'd beaten up. He was a fanatical Slovak fascist, and we were always afraid that we will be confronted with this man. So, to make a long story short, I was working at this Stavebne Društvo, and it was relatively a happy thing, because first I worked in Bratislava, but it was very dangerous in Bratislava, and I must admit that I made a mistake. I'm very against names changing, but at that time I had a friend whose name was Šaňo Španik in Žilina, a non-Jew, a Catholic Slovak, who was employed at the post office in Žilina, and he gave me an ID, because there was, I don't know whether it exists today, international postcard from the post office, and there it was written that my name is Milan Novotný. And Milan Novotný, I came to Bratislava and I had to know a different birth, when I was born and where I was born, different name, not in Karolovo na Tiso. And so I went to cinemas in Bratislava. I played a life of a non-Jew, but always in the backyard it was always very dangerous, because someone could have met me from Žilina, from other people, from other places who knew me before. So, but then it was so that my mother was in this hospital and I was with her, and she was operated, and she came often to Nitra, and this was already after September 1942, and these 2 years until September 1944, this was a hiatus. It was like a break, and what I wanted to say is that it was optimistic and very dangerous, because we never knew whether the transport will be renewed. There was the papal representative of the Vatican intervened for the Jews, and we always thought that there will be some an end to transports, and that this would be final. But we knew that it wasn't final, and we were always exposed to being caught and deported.
Sorry, may I ask you, did you know where those transport ended?
No, we never knew. There was circulating a word JPP, means jedna pani povedala. One said this kind of a story, and the other said another story. We of course never knew exactly. But we knew already in 1943, end of 1942, that there was a concentration camp in Auschwitz, and there was gas chambers, which we did not know when I was deported when I came to Žilina in March 1942. So there was something hovering over our heads all the time, and we had terrible scenes. We had to hide. For instance, there was in Nitra a hotel which was called Hotel Löffler. And this Hotel Löffler was one of the best hotels in Nitra. And although the transport were not going at that time, but there were still razzias, you know, controls from the police, who was protected, who was not protected. Maybe he was brought to a concentration camp, but not to go to Poland, but kind of imprisoned. So I remember a terrible scene. I slept while I couldn't sleep in the hospital where my mother was operated, so I slept with my brother. I think he was with me. No, I was alone. And it was a JPP, jedna pani povedala, tomorrow at 6 o'clock will be, or at 7 o'clock will be a razzia in all Nitra. And I was in the hotel, and I got up early, and I was speaking to the Slovak man and said, yes, dávajte si pozor, be careful. And suddenly I see a policeman. He looked like a Chiang Kai-shek, an old man. And he said, papiere. And so, as he said this word, I jumped out to the 5th floor. I came up of this hotel, and it was a beautiful weather. It was not cold. Must have been about 9 o'clock already in the morning. And I came absolutely exhausted, because I could jump 3 steps at that time. I was very sporty. And this old man couldn't. And what did I see? At the roof there was a Slovak girl who was cleaning laundry and ironing. And I said, prosím vás, ja som v nebezpečí života, zachráňte ma. And she said, tam máte takú skulinu pod tou strechou. And I jumped into that, and after 2 minutes the policeman came. Nevideli ste tu jedného mladého chlapca? And she said, no, nevidela som. This I remember, and I was standing there like in the mother's womb, because the place was very small, and I was just crunching and seeing those different ants and different, it was terrible. And then I heard
different what?
Ant, jako mravenci,
yes,
different birds in this skulina, in this hall. It was a terrible, and I had to be very skrčený, crunched, and finally after 1 or 2 hours I heard, už je porazí, a už môžete ísť von. I came out and so on. But what happened, you know, this had a continuation, because I lived in a continuous fear.
Yes.
This was a fear, although I was very stable, and also in the concentration camp I was maybe one of the most who considered all these things like a trip, you know, like a holiday.
Well, this was in 44?
This was around 43, 44. I don't know exactly when, but I think it was 44 already. Yes. But before the Slovak upheaval, the partizánske hnutie, because after the partizánske hnutie was crushed, had been crushed, so then started the new transport, so after 2 years. So then I came to Žilina, because my mother was protected by me, through me, because I had a biela legitimácia, and my mother was in Dlabačova 22, and I came after the operation. She was in Žilina, and now I came to visit at Dlabačova 22. And I stayed very often, because in Bánovce nad Bebravo, when I worked, there were 2 millers, jako oni robili múku, millers, and I brought my mother always. Bánovce was an agricultural community. I brought her flour, I brought her bread, brought her butter, and so And I loved very much my mother. I was very much caring for her. My father was in Nitra, but they were protected. It was called the Small Vatican, because there were some religious people, about 150, and the Pope protected them for a certain time. Therefore it was called Mali Vatican. And so I visited also my father, and because I was Banovce Topolčany, he was not far away. But then I was looking at the window from Dlabačova 22, and whom I do not see, the same policeman who chased me in Nitra. I jumped. I said, Mama, the same policeman is here, and he maybe he knew that I came to Žilina, he got to know my address and so. And my mother even didn't say a word, and I jumped out, like I jumped out later, a few months later, when all Jews had been taken. And I ran away through the backyard, and I turned around Žilina, and the whole day I was out because I was frightened to death. And around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I was looking from the corners. There was a man who was selling apples, but not perfect apples. He cut always the not good apple, you know, the parts,
yeah.
And he sold it. And I was asking, did you see him? And finally, I got a carriage and I came into the apartment. And mother started to laugh. He said, you know, this policeman was not chasing you. He got to know that one Mr. Feierlicht, a member of the Jewish community, had been deported before, and there was an empty apartment. And he was dislocated from Nitra to Žilina. And he was looking for the apartment. So you can imagine this was to me an enormous enjoyment that he was not chasing me. But such things happened very often. For instance, we slept in a bedroom, my mother and myself, and we had because we had a very nice apartment. In the apartment, in the kitchen had kind of it was not electronic, it was electric, I think. The place from where you are ringing, from the bathroom or from the second room, from the child room and so. And then sometimes we lie down on the wire of the bed, and we thought that they are coming at night. We were all the time living in this continuous fear that they will take my mother, and so I always told her, Mama, don't worry, we will survive, and you will be, because I was a Zionist, I belonged to Gordonia Maccabi HaTzair, we were singing Hebrew songs, and I was religiously, culturally Jewish, more cultural Zionist than political, because the political state was a utopia, although it was important too. But today I am more a cultural Zionist, like Martin Buber, like Ahad Ha'am, like many important men, like Moshe Hess, for instance, and so on.
May I ask you in this point, where did you learn your Hebrew?
I learned Hebrew in the Cheder. When I was 5 years old, as I told you, we were Ostjuden, and this was a very important fact. You are from Dunajska Streda, and Dunajska Streda is already a different category. People more belonging to Hungarian culture, but Kirajharza or Korolevo na Tisok, Královský Chromec, this was Ostjuden. And these Ostjuden were really the enzyme or the of culture in Prague, for instance. All these Jews who were Chazanim and who were teachers, they came from the eastern part. They were the Ostjuden. So I learned from the beginning Bereshis Buru Elohim es Hashumoi, Vesu Uretz, Vehu Uretz, Hoisu, Toihu, Avoihu. And when we were called to the Torah, so we didn't say Barhu, as Hamevorach, Asher Natan Lam, Asher Nuson, La Luni, Estoi Rusoi. So a different Hebrew, but I have, thank God, I think a good understanding of languages. And therefore, when I learned Hebrew, to me it wasn't difficult to translate this Hebrew, which I learned when I was 5, 6 years old, and then later in Topolchany, in the Masrikei Torah, when I was 12 years old, and later when I worked at the Israeli embassy from 1948 to 1952, full 4 years, that when I came to Israel and I made Aliyah in 1983 or 1984, and I went because the Jewish agency paid for me the Ulpan, and I came to the Ulpan, and the Mora said, you don't have to go to any Mitkadmim because you are absolutely perfect, you don't need it. So I was very, very pleased, and only to answer your question, then even I was teaching at the Hebrew, I mean, I got more or less a scholarship at the Hebrew University, and I got Toar professor in Jerusalem, and I taught also at the Open University, and for me they wrote about 70 Avodot Seminarioniot in the field of modernization in Eastern Europe, Judaism, or history of the Shoah, or of history of Europe, and I worked about 3 years at the Open University too. So my Hebrew is not 100% perfect, but when I speak Hebrew, so the Israelis are always saying, אתה מדבר כמו ישראלי, אין שום הבדל. So I am astonished why, you know, so this is a fact. So then later...
Okay, so we come back to the situation when you were in Žilina.
Yes, when I was in Žilina.
It was till when?
It was still 19 September 1944. So at that time we knew already that terrible things happened. We knew already the 2 Slovak Jews escaped from Auschwitz. One was from Žilina, one was from Topolchany, I think, whom I got to know later in Vancouver. He died, and he was very courageous. He wrote a book about it, and we knew what would expect us when we would be deported. So these 2 years, this hiatus, this break, was really something very a great advantage, because yes, a great advantage that we were not deported, and we were hoping, because it was after the D-Day, after the invasion of the Allied forces, Normandy,
yes.
And we hope now that we will escape the final solution to the deportation. But we were always exposed to terrible YPP. To one woman said something, you know. It was not very fair that we said one woman, but this, you know, it was kind of a habit always to say about women that they speak a little bit more than men, and so. But what happened now? I was working there, and when the Slovak partisan upheaval started, I was in Banovce nad Debravo. Banovce nad Debravo is today a city of 20,000, and it was the site of the president of Slovakia, Jozef Tiso. Jozef Tiso was born in Banska, in Velká Byča. Velká Byča is a city about 20 kilometers from Žilina, and he was the Catholic priest in Banovce. This was his site, Banovce. So, and the Slav, because he was the president, and he didn't have a presidential palace. So we were building him, and no, he had a presidential palace, but he wanted to have built in Banovce nad Debravo a cultural house, Kulturni dom. And I worked before in Prudky, near Žilina, about 15-20 kilometers, And I had a great experience. We went always home because we were really Jews. We were protected by the Slovak state, but we were never 100% sure. And one woman came in at the railway station when we were in Vrutke, she said, "Vy Židáci, vy ste naše nešťastie." And we were laughing, you know, we were young boys. I was at that time 18, 19, and we were working, and I loved the work, you know, because it was so nice. And those Slovak workers, those who were builders, you know, with bricks and Malta, we were very good friends, and we had good air, and we were making pee-pee on the walls before we were building. And I had an adventure there already. I saw a very nice gypsy girl. I'm just telling you that life was not only restricted to work, and I started with her, and I had kind of a love story, but it didn't come really to the big explosion, because either I would say the explosion occurred to me, but it was a very, you know, I just want to tell you that we didn't lose our optimism, that we had this.
In spite of the situation.
No, and some boy, I remember in Banovce, someone had a very, very good-looking boy, but they went all to the death. And they, in the evening, which was dark, they had rendezvous with Slovak girls. And they came home and they spoke about these adventures, which they had sex and everything. So, and in Vrutki, so this happened. And then later, when Tiso wanted to build this culture, a kulturni dom. So I got a letter that I have to go to Banovce nad Bebravom. Okay? So there it was much better than in Vrutki, because we had a house, and there was a young girl who was helping in the kitchen, and we had also kind of a little bit sympathy. You know, I was 18, 19. She gave me always milk, and we had a cook from he was from Polski Cieszyn, I think, and there were many French. There were about 60 Jewish people who worked on the building, and now I was looking it up. It looks terrible. At that time we thought it will be really a palace, you know, for cultural culture, you know. And so what happened? Now everything in one nice day, I see that the president, I was working somewhere I had to repair something. I was carpenter also, because I was carpenter before. And what I did, he approached me, the president, Slovak, fat man with a big beaver hood and with a big head, you know, big, it was fatty man. And he came and very friendly, he who signed the deportation of the Jews. And he looked at me and he asked, Šuhajko, ako že sa voláš? And I said, volám sa Šaňo Fried. And he stopped. He knew that we were Jews, because he signed, or his Vašek signed the certificate, and he looked at me and he said, mne sa zdá, že vy sa nikdy nestratíte. So he didn't think me, because if he would think me, he would not say vi. He would say, že ty sa nikdy nestratíš, or what. But he thought that the Jewish people were there. And this thing, maybe the one thing that he was right. And he was then condemned to death. In 1947 he was hanged by decree of Beneš. And he merited it. Although to me, I must say, he was extremely friendly and nice. And I have a feeling that he had a bad feeling, that he was the initiator of this anti-Semitism, because he was the president of the Hlinkova Strana. Yes. No, and then one day in September 1944, we were working. I was working with this Murari, and they gave
bricklayers
everything what was needed, and I loved the work. I was very healthy. And suddenly, one man who had we had to have lopati and krompače and different instruments. We had to bring back into a house. We were working, and there were different instruments. Slovenské národné povstanie začalo. A ideme hneď do Novákov. Budeme bojovať. They gave me a big help. I was very happy because we heard already about that there is in the woods there were different Poles and Russians and French came from the Marquis, from the organization of French. And I went with the other partisans to Nováky, which was from Topolčany about 40 kilometers. And I was enthusiastic. We sang Russian songs, you know, and we had the feeling that we are going to fight against the fascists, and it was 44. And but in my background always was my mother. And my mother, because she was operated in Nitra, and because she couldn't so much walk, and although she was a very beautiful woman and still very young, I mean she was 54, and this happened. So after 1 week or 5 days, I said, "Chlapci, ja nemôžem zostať. I can't stay. I must go to my mother." And it was very dangerous because at that time on that train they were always making razzias, and they checked even the trousers sometimes. And I was very lucky because I didn't look like very Jewish. I had blonde and dark hair, blonde hair, and they always said, "Pozor, pozor, je tu jeden goj." And I always said, "Nemajte strach, ja som Amchu." This was our symbol, Amchu. And but it was very dangerous to travel by train, and so I came home. And now the deportation started. And I was lucky that I came. But then what I saw was terrible. One day, because my mother had problems with the stomach, with the digestion, and there was still kind of, we couldn't buy white bread because black bread was to have, but mother needed diet. So there was a baker, and I had to go to the baker, and I got white bread. I came back, and my brother was also Dr. Ferdinand. Today is doctor of biochemistry. He lives in Ottawa, Canada. He's 2 years younger than me. And what happened now? I brought the bread, and the Dlabačova ulica is the main street. The cross street is Štefanikova, and Dlabačova, there is the synagogue. And now when I approached my apartment, because Žilina has a lower part and an upper part of the city, and this baker was in the upper part. And I came and I saw in the Dlabačova already people standing out of their houses, those who had been saved yet, with their rucksacks, with their gun cases, and they were already, there was an assessment, a policeman, a guard. I came to my mother and I said, "Mama, this is the end. And the Jews are being taken, and it is terrible." And now she went to the veranda. We had a veranda where we always waited on Shabbat together with my mother when we saw the 2 stars which came out Shabbat afternoon. And she always prepared sour milk, which she had and we had Mohnkuchen, and Schokoladekuchen, or Nusskuchen, and always when the 2 stars came out, we drank this sour milk, this yogurt, which at that time wasn't yet yogurt. And then I'm just saying that this was a marvelous place, our veranda, and she sang me different songs, Hungarian, Szép város, Kolozsvár, Otáhola, Szamosvár, or she cited me poems, and there were always in a poem a choke, some kind of a kiss, and Rózsa, and to me the Hungarian language was the nicest language because it was connected with good food, with recipes, and food can be culture, and the language can also have a psychological bearing on a person's mind. And now I said, "Mama, now is the end." And she started to cry, and she said, "Chlapci, vy sa musíte zachrániť." And she was sitting on the veranda, and I have seen the mother the last time, because I used always to say, Mama, don't worry, you will be sitting beneath a fig tree in Palestine, and I will spoil you, and you will have a marvelous life, and don't worry, and we are Bonim Israel, we are builders, we are Chalutzim, and then, you know, I was in the Miha Hashara. Before, I think I spoke about that already. So, and then this was a terrible moment in my life. I could say the worst moment was, of course, when I heard the whistle of the locomotive when Kiki Alchanishprov, Izimir Adovnik and Paulus Latner left the wagon from Žilina to Majdanek, and they were immediately shot over. They were marvelous sportsmen and intelligent boys. And I had been saved, and I don't know until today why, and maybe these were these two angels, maybe this was something from Min HaShamayim, I don't know. But this was the second moment which was to me very, very tragic. And we were very good sportsmen. My brother was a good water polo and skiing, and I was a very good jumper, high jump and sprint and football. And so there was a big wall, a beton wall from the veranda, and we left our mother sitting on the veranda. And I jumped through this beton wall, which today doesn't exist because now there is a bus station. And our beautiful apartment is now a pub. And it was terrible. I think I told you when I was with my mother, I had to go to take coal for heating, and there were big rats, and my mother came always with me, and we had a kind of all woods and irons to kill these rats, but they were almost like cats, and they jumped from one hole to another, and I was very afraid, and my mother came with me. So it was a terrible thing when we were in this apartment, because my father was in Hitra, and we were always exposed to the utmost danger that we would be taken to Auschwitz, because we never knew when it will start. But now we survived almost 2 years, and now it was the end. And what did we do? Icho and me, because we were such good sportsmen, we jumped out from the other side of the street, not in the Labachava. There was a Bulgarian garden of Bulgarians who had tomatoes and paprika and all these things. And we jumped through the park of Adolf Hitler, where we played always Chetniki, Zbojnici, Chetnici, and where we made Hlavički, Feješ, and where we made Valastuj. This is a Hungarian slope. We had one stone in the right side, and who found the stone, he said, Shanyo will be in my elf football, you know. So we had a marvelous life. But then we ran through this park, although it was written for Židov a psov zakázané. But we came, and then we went through Nová Žilina, out Budatinsky Kaštiel. We came to a river which was called Rajčanka. And this Rajčanka was about 10 kilometers or 8 kilometers out of Žilina. And it was Statarium at that time. Statarium means that everybody who left the city without permission, if he would be caught, he would be shot, because there were partisan movements started already, and many partisans had been already shot. And we risked it, but all the time I had this heavy burden on my mind. Why I left my mother, but of course at the beginning I was not thinking of it, because she said, chlapci, vy sa musíte zachrániť, and with tears in her eyes. And so suddenly we arrived and we saw a big stone quarry where they were cutting stones. And there we saw, you know, this is everything like a dream, but really it so happened. And we are standing there, so beautiful day. It was about September, the sun was shining, but we still heard the weapons from the mountains of the partisan fighting with the Germans. It was not absolutely crushed yet, the upheaval, the Slovak. And Icho said, no, we must go to the mountains. I said, no, here I know where I am, but what will up there, we don't know. And I always I was right. So suddenly we saw there 2 or 3 women, I think it was 2, Slovak. And they were, chlapci, čo tu robíte? No, firstly I saw a man who was carrying water to these workers who were working in the stone quarry. It was very hot. And I said, Ičo, podívaj sa, tu máme niečo od Pána Boha, od Boha. To je ten človek, ktorý u nás jedol pred 2 týždňami, pred 3 týždňami sme mu dali zemiakovú polievku, on prišiel, he is an inventor from Leipzig, a German Jew, how he came, I don't know. Suddenly we saw him, absolutely emaciated, pale, reddish face, and a special hat. What did he do? And there were about 100 workers working on the stone quarry, and he was carrying water. And he played a goy that he is not Jewish and that he is not normal. And so I said to Icho, and always I was the initiator, I went immediately to him. He was, and I told him, do you remember you were in our restaurant, you are the man from Leipzig? He said, please let me, in German we spoke. I spoke German already and very, very well. Bitte lassen Sie mich in Ruhe. Ich will von Ihnen nichts, ich wollte nur, vielleicht könnten Sie uns sagen, wo sich die Aufständische, wie wir da heraufkommen zu den Partisanen. He was frightened to death and he said, ich kann Ihnen leider nicht sagen. And you see the humanity of a man, what did he do? He saw that we were lost, that I was lost, and he was lost too. He took up from his hat, he had there 10 crowns and a 20 crown paper. And he said, nehmen Sie das. I said, you know, it goes me crying when I think about this thing. We were Ben Hamishpatayim. We didn't know where we belonged. The mother was, we left her there. The people were taken to Auschwitz. And we were standing here in a beautiful day and everything. So it was a terrible feeling between the borders. And my life is always connected to borders and to wandering. This eternal Jewish habit, this displacement from one place to another. But I enjoyed it in a way. But at this time it was very tragic, and I must say that there was a good star around me, because I always found some solution which was very auspicious, very positive to me. Now what happened? These 2 women were asking, chlapci, čo tu robíte? No tak my, I didn't want to say that we are Jewish. We said, no, máme strach, že moju matku, alebo so we started to say that. They immediately knew that we were Jewish people. And they said, they were very nice. I think there were 3 women. And they say, yeah, mom, you know, I have an uncle who is in Ilava, and he is výhybkár na železničiar, and he can hide you. And we said, yes, okay. And another woman said, I have another friend in another village and they can save you. And it made me, you know, when Abraham came and the 3 angels came to visit him and they gave him pat lechem vesadu libi. You know, this is a kind of a biblical story. To me it was something marvelous that those 3 women wanted to help me. But then I said, žiaľ Bohu, ja sa musím ísť podívať, čo sa stalo s mojou matkou. I said to Icho. Icho was 2 years younger than me. I was already 19 and he was 17. And he said, Šani, keď ty ideš, tak ja sa hodím do vody, do tej rajčanky. No tak sa hoď, tak ja, keď to nevieš pochopiť, if you can't understand that I would like to see what happened to our did I do? I got the courage again to get 8 or 10 kilometers to Žilina, in a place where all Jews had been already taken. Of course, there had been many hidden, you know, with Slovaks and so on, which we did not know. And I came to the apartment in Lapachova 22, and I saw a green line, Gestapo, Stempel, mother was there. It was again a terrible shock. And we had a woman, not Sudeten German, but a Carpathian German, who was very friendly with my mother because she cleaned our apartment and mother gave her food, and so it was a German. Thank you. Thank you, very kind. And I ran to her and I asked, Pani, I don't know what was her name in German, and she wasn't at home, and my mother wasn't there. So I knew that she was taken. And then I was so hungry because I didn't eat before. I brought this white bread to my mother, and I ran quickly to these Bulgarian gardens, and I had a few, maybe 5 crowns in my pocket, and I bought half a kilo tomatoes, and I went to the Czech baker, whose name was Václav Rybář, and we always brought him on Friday the cholet to warm it up, and he was connected with the Jewish community, and he said, Shani, co to robíš? To je nebezpečie života, všetci Židia. And so then I came back, and Ichor didn't throw himself to the water. He was there, he waited. It was already about 12 o'clock, hot, beautiful sun shining. Suddenly, again a miracle happened. And these women were still there. It is incredible. And one says suddenly, viete čo? Tuto v kancelárii v tom kameňolomu pracuje jeden Žid. A som povedal, to nie je možné. Židia už nemôžu tu pracovať. Ale áno, on sa volá pán Lustig. Pán Lustig, nie je možné. So, Hibaj, I went to him, went to the office, said, what can I lose, you know? Came to, like a Shimshon Hagibori, beautiful young man, about 29, 30s, or maximum 30. And I told him that sme v životnom nebezpečí, and we don't know, I don't know where we are and what we should do, prvo nás vezmú a potom nás do Auschwitzu a to. Ale chlapci, ja by som vám strašne rád vám chcel pomôcť, ale ja som položid. Moja matka je katolička, ale môj otec je Žid a volá sa Lustig. A povedal, nemôžem vám pomôcť. But he was so friendly. And the first time was this German from Leipzig. I came to Icho, I said, nepochodil som. And now I said, zase som nepochodil. Máme ešte jednu možnosť utiecť do hôr, to run into the woods and maybe to the partisans. But suddenly, after 10 minutes, someone is slapping me on my back. He says, chlapci, ja vám pomôžem. Ja som bol v nevôli. He was born something around 1889 or 90, and he was a soldier in the Austrian army, Austrian First World War.
Who was that? This was
he cut me on my back, and his name then, of course, I knew. He was Tonko Belánik from a near village which was Dlhé Pole. And imagine, he thought, chlapci, ja vás zachránim. I was in a danger in my life, and I will say, but you just have to do something which I'm telling you, because this Rajčanka was on the border of Bratislavská cesta, and there was a big bridge, long bridge, and we had to pass the bridge, and there were German soldiers. And they say, Otroch, at 3 o'clock I will be ending the work, and we will go together, but you go already. And I said, Tonko, I said, Mr. I didn't say Tonko yet, I was not French. I can't, we wouldn't go alone. If you want to save us, we must be together all the time. And he said, so I succeeded to persuade him, and we waited until they went. And I don't know how they managed. They were well known. They had bicycles. You know, they went to a rampa with like a boat to the other side of the Vaag River, and they smuggled us through from the bridge when the Germans were on the other side of the bridge. It was a long bridge, and we went with them. They on the bicycles and he with his friend, and we came to his house through the Vaag. It was very romantic, and he lived in Dlhé Pole number 1. What I wanted to say now, this was, you know, I was always telling him, prosím vás, keď bude koniec války, tak my vám dáme, čo budeme mať, a ja nechcem od vás nič, I don't want anything. So I can't understand it until today, but there was a film, and you can see the film, maybe you have seen it, in the Czech television, and you can see his family, which was given on the Czech television on the 1st of February 2009 at 1 o'clock and 10 minutes in the afternoon. And you can see it, and the title is Alexander Fried a Zázraky, Alexander Fried and Miracles. But it's not very good, it was not very well done. Why? Because they said at the beginning it was 50 minutes long, and then they cut it to 20 minutes. So it was, but if you can see it, it would be nice. So what happened now, you know, I was happy and unhappy, because mother all the time in Mladá. And we came there and they gave us food. They gave us their own bed to sleep. We listened to London, to Churchill was speaking, and they had to story. And they had an abort, a toilet outside, because it was a village, you know. And this was a village, Dlhé Pole was a village of Drotari. Drotari were these who made these holes. Yes. People didn't have enough money to buy new kitchen things, so they made these holes.
I remember.
Yeah. And there was a museum of Drotari. And so we came, and I called this story The Long Day. The long day, because it was a terrible day. And then in the evening I was sitting in the latrina, and from the skulina, from a hall of the wooden, I saw Lida Strikova, a girl whose mother was Jewish and the father was a Czech man. And I made Ki tavo'u el haaretz. This was our symbol of Godonia Maccabiatzai. When we said, Shanyo, ticho, to nesmia vie, because this village, there was a Dr. Schlesinger who was very popular, a medical doctor, and the village was very leftist and very pro-partisan movement and very pro-Jewish, and they had hidden Jews. I did not know that. There were other Jews too, and now we came and I was sitting there on a fontaine, you know, was a water kind of beautiful garden, and I was so sad in the evening because I always thought of my mother, and I could not quiet down. And so, to make a long story short, we stayed there until the 6th of December. The 6th of December, and this was really something incredible, because they were so nice to us. Now you were asked, from what could they feed us? Because his wife was called Maria, and she was from Piešťany, from around Piešťany, and she said immediately, chlapci, vy ste ako naši. Ty sa budeš volať Cyprian, to je môj brat, sa volá Cyprian, a Ičo sa bude volať Filip. Lebo to, ja mám dvoch bratov a každý bude vedieť, že vy ste, that you are my brothers or the sons of the, I don't know. So now, and what happened now, and then they invited us to work in the fields with potatoes. It was very difficult work. And there were bachoviskas, you know, where mountains a little bit higher, and they made kishka, you know, this yogurt, and there were beautiful girls, family of this Tonko Belanik. And his wife, it was Angel, you know, and she died about 5 years ago, and I was always supporting her. And she even made us tvarahové knedlíky, and she cooked for us, but we couldn't stay in their apartment, because then later it was very dangerous. There came Vlasov soldiers, and they were Bubnov, Alina Bubnov, who is hiding Jews. The house will be burned, and the people will be hanged, and many people had been hanged, partisans, and one saw them hanging. So what did they do? They did for us in the haystacks, jako také, čo sa dávalo koňom, what you give from the fields. Haystacks, they made us a room, and they made it so that we would die on cold. But there was kind of an isolation with a heater, and we slept there and stayed there, and she brought us with a ladder always up. But of course they took the ladder always away, because if so if the Nazis would come, they would say haystack. They wouldn't think that someone is hidden in a haystack, you know. So, and this was out in the courtyard. So, and now you would ask, they gave us always food, and we had to have clean shirts and clean trousers and underwear. So I came to an idea that in Žilina were still living some mixed marriages. There was Palka, yes. He was a Slovak, his wife was Jewish. There was Dr. Solt, he was a Jew, his wife was. There was Strik, and her husband was a Czech. So, and we wrote letters to them, and they gave always some money. And this went on, and we were in the haystacks. We read books, Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, or we read Graf Monte Cristo. Otherwise, we would die out of Nuda. Yes. And my brother and me, we were the best friends, because if you suffer, you are always a good friend. Then later, we were a little bit estranged. Today he suffers very much because he was in Mauthausen and later. And so this went on, and we were very popular. We knew the mother of Tonko Belanik, and he went every day to work to the Kamenolom. And one day, on the 6th of December, he didn't come home. And the 5th of December, and his Maria was already awaiting the 4th child. And we were now 4 weeks before, end of November, no, it must have been the 20th of November, I said to Tonko came to us and said, chlapci, teraz už vás nemôžem držať, I can't keep you. It is, every day they were bubnovali these Vlasov soldiers, and ja musím zachrániť moju rodinu. I said, Tonko, you have brought us here, and you were so marvelous, and now at the end you want to deliver us to Auschwitz. I spoke to his soul, and he listened again, and he said, tak dobre, vykopeme jamu v pivnici.
Okay, sorry.
Yes. So it was a great diplomatic achievement of mine. Vykopeme jamu v pivnici. It was an old house.
Yeah.
And with the same friend who took us in September to Dlhé Pole, with his good friend, to my regret I've forgotten his name. And they worked about 2 or 3 days hard work with krompače, with lopati and with reel, and they made a big hole in the cellar, and they lammed it with wood, and covered woods, if there would be a danger, we would jump in, and the potatoes would fall around. so that we would be hidden, that they would thought that we are, that they are potatoes, there's no one. But they caught him in Žilina, Tonko. Someone, there were Moserers at that time, you know, there were people who went and said, and so he didn't come. At 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, vy Židia, von! We went out. It was 6th of December 44. And Icho got such beating in his head, and I again. I never got a touch in all this time of the Shoah. Never got a touch. And now I started. Prosím vás, my sme prišli túto noc, because I was sure that they are going to kill Tonko and his wife. And I said, I lied, you know, I lied. I said, wanted to save them. Ale prosím ťa, von! And they took us to the courtyard. The courtyard, again a miracle from God. You know, you will not believe me. They developed a fight between the partisans and between the Nazis. And the courtyard. And the kulky lietali okolo našich hlav. I can't say it in English. It was so dangerous, and when it stopped, I don't know how, maybe they caught these partisans or what, and it came to me a Vlasov soldier, and he said, "Ty Evrej?" I said, "Da, yes, Evrej." "Davaj k muru." He said, "Go to the wall." And I understood, and I went, but I knew he will not kill me. I had a bitachon. I don't know how, you know, I was so... And he already took the weapon and wanted to shoot me. I was standing, and suddenly a guardist behind and came him. Nesmieme ho zastreliť, lebo veliteľ Žilinského Hlinkovej gardy, Marsina, which was, his brother was Šťuka Lísky v kino Sokol, and we knew him. On s nima chce hovoriť, aby prezradili druhých ľudí, ktorí sa schovajú, other people who are hidden. So, it was again a miracle, you know, and they took us, and the whole village came to the náklaďák, to the auto, and they took us to Žilina. And imagine that the same auto was the man, this from Vlasov soldier, who was with me, who wanted to shoot me. And I said, "No, what would be if you would have shot me, you know, we would have..." And he didn't answer. And so they brought us to not to Žilina, what do I say? Yes, to Žilina, to the police office. There were about 300 Jews, because all of them who had been caught. There was Volna Láska there were Ploštice, there were this, you know, a terrible, and the people thought this is the end, like flagellation, you know, in the Middle Ages, like the memento mori, the thinking that we are going to die, everybody, and in this terrible situation in the police office, someone is calling me Shani, and this was the father of my good friend Hansi Weiss. He was a doctor, a medical doctor, a very assimilated Jew. And he said, "Tumas Apfelstrudel," because his German maid, who was working with him for 20 years, 30 years, she baked, and the police office was opposite to that. And he died then in Sachsenhausen. He was very quickly dead when they brought us to Seret then. So what happened? This was terrible. This was the end of the world. These people in the big hall of the police office in Žilina, the people were making love there. The people were crying. The people were crying. It was terrible. It was chaos. Because we thought this is the end. You know, this was December 1944. We knew that Auschwitz, that already millions of Jews had been murdered and gassed. So, but I can't, you know, I was still very kind of optimistic in a way. We didn't sleep a lot. We didn't have any bed. We were standing under the ground in the police, you know. There was nothing. And so, and one day they took us with the car, with the train, to the train, and and they brought us to Serej, concentration camp. Serej was the worst concentration, even worse than Žilina was that I went through. I spoke about Žilina, I think, before the wagon.
Yes.
Now what I saw there, this was really my worst experience, because there was a Hungarian fascist whose name was Peter, and he was a Hungarian SS man, and he just liked to torture people. There was a school, like the concentration camp was a school, and also a bine where they played, you know, Jewish, like Esther and Hanukkah and so, and he called people to come up. And he said, so, what did you do in your life? I said, I'm a doctor, children doctor. Ah, you were killing our children. And he started to beat, killing his head. You are what? I'm an electrician. He was terrible. I thought this is the end of life. It was worse than hell. It was something terrible. And believe me, it is not a great pleasure to me to speak about it, because I'm living again this terrible situation. Although I know that in half an hour or 1 hour I will go to the marvelous city of Prague and to go to a good restaurant, maybe something to eat. But if you live again this situation and you want to tell you how things developed, what is history? History is what happened, how it happened, and what happened. So I try to be trustworthy and to tell you the real image. And when I went to sleep, I was very pessimistic. I was never so, of course in Žilina but it was short. It was about 4 days. And now there we were about 8 days in Serej. And Serej was terrible. And there were Jewish couples. And there was one Jewish couple who was very friendly. And he said, don't worry, they will not kill us. I was always afraid that this is the end. You know. And one day, this was, I think, the 15th of December. At the 6th of December they caught us. They brought us to the police. Then we stayed there about 7, 8 or 9 days. Then we were a few days in Serej. And now out, Jews. And we came out in the winter, in a terrible cold December winter. And there were again, like in Žilina in March 1943, about 15 wagons, a long column, and they threw us into the wagons. In each wagon there were 86 or 90 people. And this was the worst of the worst scenario yet no one can think. The older people started to shout, their wives, the name of their children. There was no toilet, there was no food. We were absolutely, the walls were full of ice and our jackets were slack, and these old people were always crying and shouting. And the police, in each wagon there was another small compartment where the SS were standing, in each wagon. They said, ruhig, Juden, and we were not schießen when they went in. The people were so noisy, you know, because 86 or 90 people. And now what happened? I remember I was sitting, we couldn't go through. This was a small, like 7 meter or 8 meter, 86 people. You couldn't move, you couldn't, you know, you had to go through bodies. And no pipi, no kaki, nothing, everything was, you know, hefker. So the people were they were stinking, the people were so exhausted. Suddenly, again, you would say that I'm inventing things, but I'm not inventing. Came a young boy, because there were old people and young people. There were about, I would say, 30, 40 young people. And they were even younger than me. There was even a boy who was only 12 or 14 years old. Don't know how it happened. And one boy came to me and said, Potrebujemo pilku. I have a saw, and I can cut the bar, the iron bar which closes the door, the big door. I said, no, Prosinta, I asked you, don't do it. Because if you are going to do that, so they will shoot, kill all the Wag. Because you know that they had vengeance here in the village near Prague, and they caught, so they killed all the village. What was the name here? In Lidice or in other Amadour in France and so on. And it was like night. And those people, even the war, they were so exhausted, so they slept. But we did. I don't remember that we got any food. I don't remember. Because the wagon was all the time closed, you know. And we were about 6 days on the road, on the way. The trip, and I told him, but then I couldn't keep him, and he started to sew very slowly, and he succeeded. And he cut a thick bar and opened the door, and 9 boys jumped out. It was near Prague, because we went up, and it was a lot of snow. It was about the 11th December, 12, maybe more later already. And imagine, I had already my foot down. And then we heard shooting the SS. They discovered it. And I put my foot all back. They stopped the whole transport. They came out, Juden, ihr seid alle erschossen. And they put Lachke Kulometi. And the one Jew and old said, I am a rabbi, I am the old, you have the mouth to halten, and they beat him up. And now, it was terrible. Then we got to know later, they caught all these 9 boys. It was snowing. They chased them and shot them immediately. And because I put my foot down, and I put it back, I was safe. But now, they closed and they didn't shoot us. And now I was 100%, I had a psychological breakdown. Everybody were hallucinating because I had a feeling that they are going to, because we always heard, you know, when the wagons and Eichmann, he organized very well this transport, but still they were sometimes back, forth, and you heard this skripanie tých lokomotív, vieš, a toho vagónu, and now we were sure that they isolated us, and they are going to explode us, or they are going to shoot everyone. There are different fantasies, you know. It was like a Kafkaesque story, you know, it was terrible. And so the days went on, 3 days, torture, torture, and these SS men were shouting outside, Juden schweigten, wir werden euch erschießen. And then I got a hysterical rage. I started to cry and I said, are we not ashamed? I spoke to those who remained. We are going to our death, and we are still not able to discipline ourselves. They will kill us. And whether you believe or not, almost all of the people quieted down. And after one day, a few hours, we saw railway station Sachsenhausen, Oranienburg, with SS Deckhead, Kapos, raus, raus, ihr werdet gute Vitamine sein. And the Kapos said that this Jewish, you know, they had to do it because otherwise they would be shot. And they chased us about 1.5 kilometers from the railway station. And this was already around the 22nd, 23rd of December, to the concentration camp Sachsenhausen. Because the railway station was Oranienburg, this was a city, and Sachsenhausen was about 1 or 2 kilometers, and this was a terrible experience. And those people who were not able to get there fell down because of after these terrible 5-6 days in the wagon, or 7. And we were exhausted, but because I was young and I was strong, so I could do it. And we came to the, it was called, into a big hangar, it was called, that we had to clean ourselves. It had a quarantena, it was a quarantena, and we slept on the ground, and people got cold, and some people died there, and it was infections, and terrible, terrible. And then again a miracle happened, because they said, my brother and you will be in the youth block, because we were not yet 20, and so we worked for the Heinkelwerke, for the planes, and this was good. We were a little bit, and I was the head of the Jewish table, and the Ukrainians were stoning Blad, Yevreyskaya, Zalupa, they were the worst. The Poles were very good. There were different groups. Slovaks were also with us, who were in the Slovak Povstanie, and they were very frightened to death, not Jewish Slovaks. But our table, and I got the function Brandwache, means if there would be fire, I got one soup more. And those Ukrainians, they couldn't stay. They were so envious. Oh, Zalupa, Brandwacha, and we were always afraid. And at night when we went to bed, this was the worst experience of all. My number was 121,199, and my brother's number was 121,200. And when we lied down on this wooden beds, well, the SS men came around 10 o'clock and called numbers, like a lottery. 100,000, 15, 180, 89. They took out these young boys and never came back. So we were trembling, when will they got us? And every morning at 6 o'clock there had to be Appellplatz. And if someone had stolen a bed, so he was publicly hanged. Mützen up, Mützen down. They were just humiliating us, It was terrible. But what was the worst, I didn't tell you, when we came on to Serej, and this I will never forget. There was a very young, good-looking Jewish boy. He was about 30 years old. I was 19 at that time already, and he ran away. And he came to the railway station in Serej. This we heard later, and because they were calling Appell, and he wasn't there. And die SS came, wer hat diesen Mann gekannt? Wir gehen zum Bahnhof. And they discovered him sitting there on a bench. They brought him back, concentration camp, and I was a witness. They said, gehen Sie weiter. And he went, shot, killed. I will never forget that. He was already sitting down on the bench, and he hoped that he will be trained. So therefore I'm saying, we always think that we are rich, we have a lot of money, and we are healthy, but no one can predict the future. No one can predict. And when you have seen so many unhappy, for instance, there was one boy whose name was Hansi Hersch. The Hersch, they had the richest, one of the richest people in Žilina. In Žilina were 3,500 Jews. And they had the Hotel Rémy, French name, near the railway station. And they had 3 sons, and one of them was Hansi. And the mother was a tall Jewish lady from Berlin and assimilated, and the father was a small man. He's buried in Marienbad in the Christian. They were very assimilated. And he was the champion of ping pong in Slovakia, and he was, all girls chased him because he was very good looking and he was very elegant, beautiful tie. Suddenly, in Heinkel, in Sachsenhausen, I see him, Hansi. He was absolutely now. I said, Hansi, there's some Chelsea. I gave him a ring. Some people were absolutely, they lost their mind, they lost their melancholic or different other psychological problems. After a few days he was dead, and they burned him there in the, like all, there was a fire. You see, when you went through these things, so you have a different understanding of life, but in spite of all of these terrible happenings which I went through, I didn't lose my optimism, I didn't lose my pleasure in life. And even in concentration camp, and I've seen a terrible scene which I will also never forget. It was a Czech boy, because there were many Czechs, non-Jewish, and we were very friends, you know, at that time Slovak Czechs and Jews, we were all in concentration camp. And he was a young boy, about, I would say, 19, young like we, good-looking, typical Czech with blue eyes and very nice cheeks, rosy. What did he do? He was so hungry that a homosexual made love with him, and they got to know it, the Czechs, and they thought, what's to do, and they had given him 25. Like Malchus Arbaim, state in the Yom Kippur, if someone makes a sin, Malchus means beating, 40. So he was beaten up, and I had so pity with him, I remember, and I didn't say anything. At that time, homosexuality, because there were different prisoners. There were the homosexuals who were the longest, because already 1933,
Yes.
40, and they had a better position in the country. They had more bread, and then there were the Jehovah Witnesses, then there were communists, there were different types, but we Jews were on the lowest scale, and it was terrible. And so I'm just telling you a few intermezzi, and suddenly I got cold. And I made a terrible stupid thing, and I went to there was a hospital, and in the hospital was an Indian doctor. And we didn't call hospital Spital, we called it Revier. I don't know why Revier. So it was called. And this Indian doctor said to me, don't come here, go away. And I got 3 under Leibchen and 3 underwear, trousers and socks, and I left, because if someone got sick in the hospital, so he was sent to crematorium. And my brother, because he was already a biochemist and he knew injections to give, he was in the Revier, and he came and gave me always bread and gave me a jacket, you know, in this terrible concentration. And suddenly came to me 2 Germans, they said, put their hands on my head. Laufen Sie noch schnell, vielleicht wenn Sie Ihren Bruder sehen. Man hat liquidiert das Revier. I said, mein Bruder? You know, because they took the whole hospital, they put them somewhere out. We did not know where. We know then later that he came to Badhausen, and I saw the last 2 compartments of the train. So it was terrible. It was February 1945. But you will not be upset. I have now enough.
I understand you very much.
I'm very exhausted, you know, because I'm living all these things like